Right, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to code getting past a static bush that's blocking the way, such as a door. So we'll go to the editor, and the first thing we need to do is create a door. We'll put one in between these two rooms. So first of all we need to get rid of these two walls that are blocking the way. So if we pick the brush and then delete them, and then put a new wall in, making sure to leave a gap that's 24 pixels high, which is 3 grid blocks on the map. Now we need to find a door in the tiles, so we'll have a quick search for one. I think there's one in there. There we go, that's a nice little door. Change the colour of it to a sort of browny colour, and we'll plonk it down there. Now that's good, it's still a bush and it's still a block, and what we need to do now is to set a trigger to open it. So if we go back to the map, I normally use a plain white tile that I set some hideously vivid colour like purple. Now I'll set that down in a 16 by 16 block right next to the door. Now that is currently a bush as well, and it's currently block, and we don't want it to be that, so we'll change the properties to be a dynamic object because we're actioning it. We're going to be actioning it anyway. Material doesn't matter anymore, so we'll keep it as air, and we don't want to draw the image because it's, well, purple, so we'll just change it to matte so that it can be actioned. Now on the class we need to change it to action so that it is actionable, and then finally in the ID box we need to set it with a unique ID number so that we can call it in the map. So we'll set it at 2000 for now. We also need to set the properties of the door as well. Everything is okay on that except for the ID. We need to create an ID for the door number as well. So we'll set that at 2001. And the final thing we need is an item to open it with. So if I pick the brush of the object, I've now changed it to object, it's 2000 hidden and action. So I'll go to pick an object to open it with, and we'll use a key. Change the key colour, and we'll put that down there. Obviously we have to change the properties of this as well because we can't have it the same ID, so we'll change that to 1000. I generally use the 1000s for item numbers, and we'll change the class to item. Now obviously we want to draw it in the map, so we'll change that back to image and mapped, and that's everything set on there. We've now got a key, object 1000, we've got an object that acts as a trigger for the door, which is object 2000, and we've got a brush that's a blocker that acts as the door, which is object 2001. Now we've had to put a trigger down because you can't action a block item. So we'll save that. That's saved now. So now we'll go to the code. Now if we go in game, there's a few things here. What we need is the bit down the bottom that's noted as interactions. We don't need to put it here, but it's the most sensible place to put the code. Now I'm going to copy the code in because it's quicker to do it that way. I'm already halfway through the time limit for this tutorial. So if we paste that in there, I'll talk you through it. Now this bit here is just a little reminder for me to tell me what the following bit of code relates to. Obviously it's got the double forward slash on each line to tell the code, to tell the game that it's not code, it's just some notes. Right, so we're starting a new function. this is action object 2000, which is the trigger. And there's also another function called useObject 2000, and that has an IDX variable in the brackets, which is used to call a variable in, and I'll show you that in a moment. So the first line of code in the action object, the first thing it does when you click enter on the trigger that we've put in the map is to say variable IDX is equal to open dialog inventory, which is a function. Now what that does is it basically tells it to open the inventory dialog, and there you are prompted to select an item to use or drop. IDX merely tells the game what, or it's stored in IDX whatever you use. So if, say, you open the dialog and you select the key to use, it then tells the game that the key is stored in IDX. Then you go on to the next line. If whatever you've selected is anything other than -1, then use it. Now, this requires a bit more explaining. -1 means that you've not selected anything at all. The exclamation mark and equal means anything other than. So this is basically saying if what you have selected is anything other than nothing, in other words, if you've selected something, then use it. Now that then calls another function that does a bit of code and then calls this function here, useObject 2000. And IDX is carried over from here into the other function and then back into here so that it knows what you're using. Oh dear, what's happened to the thing? There we go, that's better. Right, so once it's done that, it goes into the useObject function, and this tells it that if the object that you've got has an ID, an object ID of 1000, you have to use the double equals sign, by the way, for equals, then do this code. Otherwise, do this code. Pretty simple. Now you have to use object get because it's an object. And again, you have to use O_ID because it's an object. If it was a brush, you'd use brush get and B_ID. Right, so we move on. You've got two lines of messages here. This is message 0. There's three different types of messages. There's message 0, 1 and 2. All they basically do is change the colours of the dialog boxes. Message 0 is usually used for narration. Message 1 is used for when Dizzy speaks, and message 2 is used for when other characters speak. This tells it the X and the Y position of where to start the dialog box, and that tells it the dialog, all encased in little brackets here. And then we've got another message box. I normally stagger them, so we've moved it along one, except that's wrong. That should be a 5, so that it appears to the right and below the box. And then we've got another bit of text there. This \n in the middle, all that simply does is creates a new line. And then we pop the message using that. So when a player presses return, it'll then, from this, it'll display that. Then when the player presses return, it'll display this, and then when the player presses return again, it'll pop the messages and go through the rest of the code. Inventory sub removes the IDX item from the inventory, and then we move on to the rest of it. Here we're saying that we're defining a new value for IDX. This time we're saying that it's the object 2000, which is the trigger. Obviously we don't need to use the trigger after we've already used it. So in this line we're setting the object IDX. We're setting the object disable property to 1, which is disabled. 0 is enabled. Then we move on again. We're setting a new property again for IDX, and this time we're finding the brush 2001. Now we're finding the brush there because it's a static object, which is the brush. So we're setting the draw property of the door to 0. Now 0 is don't display anything. I'll just go back to the map and show you the draw property. 0 is draw none. Set that back. Now, anytime you change a brush property, you have to update the material map, and you do that by calling the command refresh function. And that's it, pretty much. What that'll do, it'll display a couple of messages saying that. It'll then remove the item from the inventory, it'll disable the trigger, and it'll stop drawing the door. Pretty simple. So we'll save that and we'll give it a test. As we can see, we can't walk past the door. If we pick the key up, now it's saying you're carrying nothing. That's a little issue I forgot about. So we'll go back into the scripts and we'll change that. Now at the top here there's a function called object sets names. All we need to do is copy that little bit of code out of there, into there. Now this simply sets the name of the object 1000 as key. So we'll save that again. And try again. Simple. And now drop that anywhere we want, pick it up, and if we go along here we can use it. Now you can see it's removed it from the inventory and it's removed the door as well. What can be simpler than that?